Hi, welcome to Infinite Resilient Stories, where we're redefining what it means to be human, one story at a time. My name is Luis Feliz, and I'm your host, and also the guy behind the camera asking all these questions. In this interview, you will have the opportunity to hear the unique life experience of Becca. We believe her life is a miracle, just like yours. And as we listen to these stories, our ability to love and honor each other will eventually evolve, and perhaps making the world a better place. So, if you like this interview, please give it a thumbs up. And if you like the channel, please subscribe. And if you find yourself connecting or relating to the story, please comment down below. We would love to hear your thoughts. All right, so without further ado, enjoy the interview. Peace out. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for doing this.
Oh, my pleasure.
I appreciate it. So we're going to start with basic questions, which is, what is your name?
So my full name is Rebecca.
Okay. Now, where were you born?
I didn't say the question.
That's okay.
I was born in the Bronx. You asked me where I was born. I was born in the Bronx, New York, and quickly after 6 months moved with my family down to Florida. So pretty much lived here my whole life.
Oh, what year were you born?
76.
76. Okay. Now, any stories about your birth?
Well, I've been told, stories about my birth. I have been told that it was at Albert Einstein in the Bronx, the hospital, and that it was across from a chopped liver factory. So there was a very strong smell, apparently, wafting in the day I was born. I was born in the morning. And apparently my dad was kind of late getting there, and my mom was kind of frustrated with him. So those are the stories I've heard.
Okay, all right. Little side note. Sometimes after we finish the interview, people are left with more questions for their parents, siblings, and friends. Because they're like, oh, that's a good question. I would love to know more about it.
It's true, it's true.
Yeah. All right, so next, what's your father's name?
My father's name is, he doesn't like his middle name to be said. So I learned that a long time ago.
Yeah, and where was he born and when?
My dad was born in New Jersey, and I actually don't know what city. He was born in December of 1937.
Okay. What is or was his occupation? Is he alive?
My dad is alive, and he's a psychiatrist who retired just about 2 years ago.
Oh, wow. Okay. Any memories you recollect about him exercising his profession?
Memories about him?
Being a psychiatrist?
Oh, a lot. I mean, a lot. He is a lot of the reason that I do what I do. And for the last few years, we've shared an office. So, when I first moved back to Florida in 2008, the reason really was to start a practice with my dad, or to join my dad in practice. And so, I can recall the first client, he calls them patients, that we shared. And I thought it was going really well. I had done the assessment, and then sitting there, I looked over and he's kind of staring at me like with these googly eyes, as if I had pigtails. So a lot of memories there. And his retirement was like, I was really excited for him, and there's also been some grieving for me in the last 2 years, because I'm really psyched to have the office and for him to have passed it on. And yet I kind of miss practicing with him. So there's a lot of memories.
You mind sharing one?
I think the first one was, when I first moved back here in 2008, I, moved back to get my license and start practicing as a clinical social worker. And I had no confidence, or very little confidence at being in private practice, although that was absolutely my goal. And, my dad is my dad. He's always the constant champion for me. Like, you can do it, it's fine, you just gotta get started. And I ended up having several other jobs to make a living and, working full time. And then after a series of other jobs, I decided I could do it. And, he gave me the same speech he did the first day. And the day I came back to the office, he said, all right, welcome back, let's go. And it was like no time had passed. And we shifted a few things, like he had a certain day, I had a certain day, instead of trying to work on the same day, which was too challenging. But it was really, I guess the ultimate part of it was nice to kind of be his partner, even though, we weren't partners, we worked autonomously. And, the day he retired, it was really kind of like the passing of the torch. So that's kind of like a lot of different memories at one, but it was really the day I came back to working at that office, and he just kind of said, welcome back, but in a sense it was kind of welcome home.
Yeah. How many years did you work with your father?
Overall, how many years have I worked with him? Probably, since 2008, so on and off for 9. I didn't necessarily work out of that office for a few years, but I also used my dad for consultation and supervision at times. So I would say, what are we, 2019? Almost 10 years.
Now, not everybody gets a chance to work with their parents. What would you share with somebody, or what's it like to work with your parents, with your dad?
What's it like to work with my dad or parents? Well, I think I should start with, I don't know that I could work with my mom because she's an attorney. And what's it like working with my dad? Almost seamless. That's the first feeling that comes up. I say to people that I feel like I was drawn to this profession from an early age. So I think I grew up living around, let's talk about it, and how do you feel about that? And so I think working with him was kind of natural, and almost as if I'd been doing that my whole life. And then, I went back to school and got some training and then could speak his language. Mm-hmm. So natural.
Okay, all right. Now back to your mother. What's your mother's name?
My mother's name is...
Okay, where was she born and when?
My mom was born in New York, and in 1947, okay. November of 1947.
All right, and what is or was her occupation?
She is, my title for her is overachiever, with, from the most humble place. She started out as a nurse and went as far as she could, was an oncology specialist, and then pretty much was, a nurse practitioner functioning almost as a doctor, and kind of went so far that nobody could hire her because she was so overqualified. And so then she went back to law school when I was in middle school, high school, and became an attorney with the goal of doing medical malpractice, which is, by way of other jobs as an attorney, that's what she ended up doing before she retired. She retired, I think, about 3 years ago. So an attorney, a litigator, and she's a true litigator, but also with a nursing background or a medical background.
Okay. So both parents are retired?
Both parents are retired.
How does that feel?
Good for them. They're so happy. It's kind of weird, I think, still. I didn't know that my mom would retire, and then she did before my dad. And I know my dad really wanted to, he was ready, I think, to stop working, loved what he did, and was kind of worried he wouldn't know what to do with retirement. And I think I also felt the same about my mom. I don't know that she knew what she was going to do either. But they've been traveling a lot and kind of using their time. And they say if you ask them what they do all day, they couldn't answer you, but they're loving it. So, it's still a little weird.
Okay. Now, siblings, do you have any?
I do. I have 2 older brothers. Both my parents were married before. They were married and had me. So I have, my oldest brother is my dad's son, and he is 9 years older than I am. And my middle brother is 6 years older than I am, my mom's son. And
are they here in South Florida?
Anthony is in South Florida. He lives north of here, and David lives in Texas.
Okay. Now, yes, where did you grow up?
I grew up down here, pretty much from 6 months on. I grew up in Boca and left when I was 18. Well, traveled out of the country for the first time at 17. Saw that there was an entire world out there outside of history class. And then left when I was 18, went to college and said I would never come back. And then never say never. So yeah, pretty much here from 6 months on. So I don't have a memory of, although I was born in the Bronx, my parents were living in Connecticut at the time. I don't have any memory of that. So all I remember is here until I left as an adult.
Yeah. Okay, now describe the house you lived in.
Describe the house I lived in. Well, my parents still live there. So it's very much a place of security and home. when anything is happening, you know, like my life is exploding, it's in chaos, going back there it's a sense of peace and calm. Even, you know, if like the air conditioning's not working or during a hurricane or something like that. It's a Spanish child, you know, 1-story house, and there's a pool, there's, you know, a living room where we spend most of the time. You know, there's been a dog since as I can remember. Once I enrolled my parents into getting a dog at age 8, I think. There's always been a dog there. It's very cozy and homey, and, you know, there's always someone there to welcome you.
Okay. So that's the same house you grew up in?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I should say, again, I have no real memory of it. I think we've lived in the same neighborhood since my parents moved here. They lived in another house for a few years, but I don't remember that. So this is the house I remember probably from, I could ask, but I think I was like 5, 4 when they moved into that house.
Okay. Describe your room.
My room is a square with a lot of light. Always had my mom's high school furniture, which is like this brown mahogany, like very proper, you know, double bed and huge bureau. There have been several people that have lived there since I was a kid. My brother lived there, other families lived there. But the way it looks right now is my mom has kind of taken it over. There's still lots of like my stuff and my brother's stuff on the shelves. But now it's kind of like a makeshift guest room, and she kind of uses it to stage things she's giving away, or, you know, I think when she was working, she kind of took over the closet. It's got a lot of light. I think that was one of the things I loved about it. And it was right in the center of the house, right? And right by kind of the front door, so.
What kind of games did you play as a kid?
What kind of games did I play as a kid? I wasn't a huge game person. I mean, I came from a family that played board games. So when you say that, I think of my teaching me how to play Chutes and Ladders that I got for the holidays. Chutes and Ladders? Yeah, I think Chutes and Ladders. No, Candyland. And so board games like Sorry, Clue. We played Clue. But when I got Candyland for the holidays, he taught me how to play by saying, you know, you move, and then I go twice. And then you go, and then I go twice. So then when I tried to teach my dad how to play Candyland, I said, I go, you know, or you go, and then I go twice. Mm-hmm. My dad was like, those are not the rules. So that's the kind of game I think about. I wasn't a huge like video game person. That wasn't really for me. I mean, I like analytics, so I think when Nintendo came out, I really loved Tetris. I still do. Mm-hmm. But that's about, you know, that and Miss Pac-Man are like the extension of my gaming. And I also grew up playing outside. So, you know, we played things like hide and seek, you know, or capture the flag, games like that.
Okay. So you said your brother lived with you for some time.
My middle brother lived with us on and off when I was a kid. So he's 6 years older than I was. There were periods where he also went to boarding school, you know, or different boarding schools, so he wasn't there. He did graduate from high school when I was there. But it was kind of on and off throughout my childhood. And my oldest brother grew up in Texas, so I didn't grow up with him.
Okay. How was it having your middle brother?
How was it having my middle brother at home? I mean, we that's a long story.
We got time.
I think that the way to start the answer to that is that he and I are still working on our relationship at this point. Having him kind of come and go, I often felt like an only child. We didn't really know so much about each other. And like, I remember when we were little, and there are all these pictures of us when we were little, you know, traveling, family stuff. I was kind of like, you know, the annoying girl and the annoying little sister that he had to kind of take care of on the bus, but I don't really feel like I knew him. And then I think when I started to get a bit older and, you know, talking like 9 or 10 and starting to form relationships, you know, he was in and out of the house. So I didn't really get to know him.
If you had to describe your childhood with one word, what would it be and why?
If I had to describe my childhood in one word, I don't know. That's a hard one. I mean, the first word that came to mind is blessed.
Okay.
And I'm not really a spiritual or religious person, or, you know, words like that don't first come up. But yeah, I mean, I was really lucky. You know, as I'm the only girl, I'm the youngest. There were periods where I did function, you know, kind of like an only child. I got my parents' attention. You know, I had, you know, when they came together and got married, you know, they said they got married to have a daughter named Rebecca, which, you know, kind of awkward for my brothers, but, you know, I got the most of them, you know, in a happy relationship. And so I think I really benefited from that. I was an extension of that. You know, they were my champions, things I wanted to do, things I wanted to try. You know, it didn't matter if it was soccer or ballet. I mean, they were, let's go for it, let's do it. And I think they did that for my brothers, but in a different way. And I mean, to reflect, sitting here today, thinking about my childhood and given what I do and listening to people and their childhoods, like really blessed. I mean, I was afforded a lot of opportunities. I was always encouraged. I said that, you know, they are, and they're still my champions. I mean, still being a student right now, I mean, they are my constant champions. When I started 2 years ago, my mom texted me like, we don't get to take you to school today, you know, I mean, so they are. And I think that has shifted in my adult relationship with them, you know, reflecting back on childhood as now I live close to them. You know, I moved back in 2008. Before that, I didn't live near them and didn't really think much of it. And now I'm so grateful to have, you know, the adult relationship that was really built as a foundation when I was a kid.
What sort of things did your family celebrate?
What sort of things did my family celebrate?
Like holidays, you know?
I'm thinking about my dad's mom, my grandma. She very much, I think, instilled celebrating traditions. And I think my mom and then her mom as well have kind of focused on carrying that kind of thing on. It wasn't so much about the holidays specifically, but more about like creating memories and having traditions or getting together, just being with your family. So, I mean, my dad was raised Jewish. My mom was raised Unitarian kind of at the end of her, you know, childhood. I was also raised Jewish, but I'm not really religious and haven't been for a long time. But we celebrated, you know, certain holidays like Passover. We celebrated Christmas. Christmas was a big thing to my mom. I think Thanksgiving was the most kind of neutral holiday, you know, drawing people together. And even when we lived in different places, coming back for that. And then birthdays. I mean, birthdays aren't so big about like presents, but being with somebody and, you know, being able to connect in that way. And I think as we got older, it was also, I would say my extended family, kind of on my dad's side, they're very big about traveling to events. So like graduations and some like milestone birthdays, but weddings, graduations. It's kind of known that my extended family, you know, like I could never really go out to dinner with everyone in my college graduation because my family, there were 13 of them. So it was like, you know, 13 of my other friends and their families, and then the 13. Yeah. So celebrating any kind of milestone, people travel for that or do their best to travel for that. And I don't know, I've been kind of in a bubble for the last 2 years, but I think they still do that. My parents have started doing that. Now that they're retired, they can be kind of the family representative at certain things, so.
Okay. Now, can you describe one of those celebrations, whichever one you can recall?
So the first one that comes to mind in describing one of the celebrations was my cousin Evan's Bar Mitzvah. Because it was in Ohio, and I was designated as the family representative to go from our local family. And I want to say I was 10. I think I had met my cousin Evan once before. And it's relevant because my cousin Evan passed away 2.5 years ago or 3 years ago at this point. So that's the first thing that came to mind. And so we had some kind of award ceremony at school that day that my parents insisted on going to, and you know, I was apparently getting some award, whatever. And my flight was pretty close to that, and I went to school in Fort Lauderdale. So I said, why don't we all just why don't we, and I was 10, I think, fourth grade or fifth grade. I said, why don't we just go to the airport from school? No, we'll have time, we'll come back. Okay, well, of course, we didn't have time. So we went home, and on the way to the airport, bumper to bumper traffic, we get to the airport, it was back when you could leave the car by the side. We start walking. My dad can't find a parking spot, so he just leaves the car. We leave it. I've never seen him do anything like that, just leave the car. And we start walking, and he can't find the ticket. So we get to the ticketing agent, and he's trying to explain, this is my, minor child, like she just needs to get on a plane, she's going to a family celebration. We're also already 25 minutes late, but they've held the plane magically. And my dad ends up buying another ticket just right on the spot because it was that important for me to go, I guess. I've never seen him do anything like that or be any kind of panic like this. And I get on the plane, full flight, and this small child gets on the flight. I mean, I wasn't that small, but everybody kind of looks over like, this is who we're waiting for. I sit down and no joke, the lady next to me goes, would you like some candy? And I'm like, don't you know we're not supposed to accept candy from strangers? Anyway, I finally make it. The plane made up time. There was a storm in Ohio. I get picked up. It's fine. We get to the Bar Mitzvah like a little bit late, for the dinner on Friday. And I sort of walked in a little bit kind of disoriented, saying hello to people. And then out of nowhere, my cousin Evan, who at that point was reintroduced to me, wearing this fluffy, itchy Kelly green sweater, just like envelops me in this huge hug. And he's like, I'm so happy you're here. And that, I don't even remember the rest of the weekend. That's kind of what I remember. And from that point forward, he and I became pretty close. And, in college, he was around in medical school and he met his wife there and I was the first one to meet her. And so that was one that always sticks out in my memory.
Yeah. We're back.
We're back. Okay.
Now, what was your family's attitude towards alcohol and smoking?
My family's attitude towards alcohol and smoking. As a child, growing up in the house, I guess I would start by saying, my parents are, I wouldn't say rigid, but strict. They, want you to adhere to what the laws are and, legal ages and things like that. And yet, I think at family celebrations, it was often kind of, not so much my parents, but when the extended family was around, it was kind of understood that if you're going to try something, you try it with people that you trust, which I think is an important life lesson going forward, because once you leave the house, if you're going to try something, try it with somebody you trust, no matter what it is. Smoking, they were big no to. My mom smoked, my dad never smoked cigarettes, that is. And she was vehement against that. Also being an oncology nurse and, seeing people that, not everybody who has cancer gets it from smoking, but that was a huge thing for her. And my brother smoked for a while. My middle brother smoked for a while. And that was, hearing that conversation, it was more like arguments. So that was definitely a no. That was pretty rigid about it. But the alcohol, I would say, especially at like parties or, like family celebrations, they were a little bit more lax about that and wanting you to at least experiment with people, that you did trust.
Right. Now, what was discipline like at home?
What was discipline like? Well, I never got in trouble. No, I'm kidding. No. Well, I think there's the benefit of, as a third child, I learned, or even as a second child in that house, I learned how to work around things. I learned how to not get in trouble. I would follow the rules because there was always an example before me who would, do something egregiously out of control. I think my parents were pretty strict about certain things. They asked, they said our responsibility was to get an education. And so, if we failed a test or we didn't study for it or we kind of blew something off, they would just come back to, that's your one responsibility in this house. I definitely had punishment, in terms of, or consequences. I wasn't hit, Although, I think I grew up in a time when that was a little bit more socially acceptable, but my parents didn't. Again, I learned, I learned from my older example. I think I had consequences, and they were usually in the form of a choice. You can either accept this or you can accept this. I got grounded. They couldn't take my phone away, but they could take my phone privileges away. I couldn't do things with friends on weekends. Or I couldn't watch TV. I think that was a bigger deal when I was younger. Or I would have to do something like work, like in addition to things like unloading the dishwasher or setting the table, I would have to do things that my brother had to do, like take out the garbage, which I hated. Or like clean the toilet occasionally, which, I was never asked to do. Stuff like that. Or it would be helping my dad outside or, coming with my mom to work one day or something like that, So, they were pretty, I would say, they responded, when something went wrong. They didn't ignore it.
Okay. You mentioned something about TV.
Yes.
That was a big deal when they took TV away. What was your favorite TV show growing up?
Gosh, my favorite TV show. What age are we talking about?
When taking it away was a big deal.
God, I don't even know how old I was, but there was a show called Kate and Allie. And it was like two, single moms who were raising children together. I don't even remember what city it was. I want to say Chicago, but I loved that show. And my mom and I would watch it together. And so that would be something that she would take away. I want to say like 8, I don't know. But that was a big deal. I used to watch Miami Vice with my dad. And I wouldn't be allowed to watch that. That was like on Friday night. So I would just like be stuck doing nothing on Friday night. Trying to think there was another show, but Kate and Allie and Miami Vice were the first things that come to mind. Oh, and I would occasionally, this was back when the VCR came out and you could record it. My mom and I, like a guilty pleasure would be to watch a soap opera that like you could, of course today still pick up, it's still on, you could still pick it up, same stuff's happening. And she wouldn't let me watch that, so.
Do you remember the soap opera?
Oh yeah, The Young and the Restless. It's still on. Some of the same people, same characters.
You can't take it away from me.
No. And I did, when I was little, I used to watch Saturday cartoons. I don't even know if they still have those in the morning. But that would be something she took away. And so that was like a real bummer on a Saturday morning, to not be able to watch that.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Now, where did you go to school to go out, starting from elementary?
That's an awesome question. So I went to school at a small, for kindergarten, pre-K, I don't remember pre-K, but kindergarten I went to a place called the Training Depot, which was like a small upstart school in Boca. I said my first 2 curse words there. And
what were they?
Fuck and shit, right in the middle of class. And I got sent to the corner. And I remember that, you asked me about discipline earlier, and I'm thinking about that is, language and words in my house were understood, like certain words like that, you just didn't say in public. So, when I got picked up that day and, my teacher told my mom what I had said, she was like, okay, got it. And then we drove away and she was like, but not to say that in a public place. And I'm like, I know, but I was pushing the boundaries. So that was kindergarten. And then in first grade, I went to a private school. I started going to private school in Boca, which doesn't exist anymore either. It's called Boca Academy. And Boca Academy was subsequently bought by another private school called Pinecrest. But the campus in Boca is where I went to first, second, and third grade. In the meanwhile, my parents wanted me to transfer to the Fort Lauderdale school. And I got in every year, but there wasn't enough room. So fourth grade, they opened up another class, and I transferred to Pinecrest in Fort Lauderdale and went there until I graduated.
Pinecrest, the one right down the street? Oh.
On Cypress Creek Road.
Yeah.
Right. The Schnau is massive. It's massive.
Yeah. So that's to high school?
Yep, through high school. I went there from fourth grade to graduation.
Okay. And after?
And after, I went to the University of Michigan. I wanted to go as far as I could, right? I said I wanted to get out. And I applied to a bunch of different schools. I really didn't have like one school I wanted to go to, although I wanted to go with my best friend. She applied to UPenn. I didn't get in, she did. And Michigan, I went to visit, because a lot of people in my high school applied there as kind of a safety school. I wasn't allowed to change time zones, so I could pick any university without changing time zones, which kind of limits a whole bunch in the country. Again, because I'm the youngest and the girl, so I had to stay somewhat close. So I picked Michigan, which is basically as far as I could go. Yeah. And I went to visit it in January, weekend in January. It was 13 degrees outside, standing there in the middle of campus, and my brother's holding my ears because it's so windy, and I was like, I love it here. It just looked like college to me. So that's where I went. And I would be back there if I could now. I went back to master's there. I got my social work degree in Michigan a little bit later, and then up until today, I'm at FAU. Yeah. So.
Okay. So you mentioned that you wanted to get away.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate? Why did you want to get away?
Why did I want to get away? I went to Israel when I was 17 for the summer for 6.5 weeks, and that probably was the first place where somebody said, welcome home to me. And you get off the plane and they say, welcome home, as part of a group of teenagers. And, I had traveled around the United States a little bit, but mostly just for family events, and the same places over and over again. So it was the first place outside of the United States that I could really kind of see everything that we had studied, or like seeing other cultures, seeing, and things I had learned about, like in Hebrew school. And I caught the bug of wanting to see the rest of the world. So when I came back from that, I was, and then being told that I could only apply within the time zone, I didn't like that. I wanted to see what else was out there. So it wasn't so much I was getting away from something, although maybe I was, or escaping. It was more, I just wanted to see what else was there. And now had the awareness that, there was just so much outside of Boca. Yeah. Also really felt like, it still is, but South Florida is a place where people come from the north, either to retire or, for their holiday, because it's so cold up north at times of the year, which was awesome. Like friends from camp, friends from college would always come back here. But I just, at 18, I knew there was more out there, and I really wanted to see on my own. And so that's kind of why I wanted to get out, or said I wanted to escape.
Okay. Yeah. So you mentioned that perhaps you were escaping, or I'm not sure. So is it one or the other?
I think now I don't know that I've pinpointed something I want to escape from, something specific like a person or, food or...
The traffic.
Could be the traffic. Although I think the traffic's gotten much worse with more people that live here. But I think there was just kind of a calling, like there's more out there, there's more... I never really felt like South Florida had a lot of culture, and it was kind of people from the north, at least over here in Southeast Florida. I just wanted to see other walks of life and how people live differently. I never realized that people didn't live in gated communities until I went to college. That sounds like the silliest thing, but in talking to other people, they're like, neighborhoods just aren't like that. Growing up in Boca, everything is a gated community. So stuff like that, it's just kind of like silly but mind-blowing. I don't know. I think I'm still trying to figure out like why I was, wanting to run or escape. I think also, I lived in kind of a secluded world. My family was close, friends. I went to the same school for a very long time. That was a huge thing for me, and a huge eye-opening experience being in Michigan. Everybody said to me, like, do you know how many people go there? It's 45,000 people. And I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait to walk around every day and not see someone I knew, and not have to engage with like the same story from last year or something. I couldn't wait. I was sort of worried. There were 3 people from my class that went. I was like, am I going to see them? And I did, and it was fine. But I loved that. I loved kind of being in this sea of people for you to kind of find your own path. I think maybe that was it. Like I was really looking to find my own path.
Yeah. All right, awesome. So how was going to school in Pinecrest?
Whew, we do not have enough time for that one. Going to school at Pinecrest.
From 4th grade to
12th. Yeah. This is a very scripted answer. I would say looking back, I am really lucky. I had a really wonderful education it's a college preparatory school. It definitely prepared me for how to study, how to organize my thinking. But personally, it's tough. It's a tough place. And I have nothing else to compare it to because I didn't go anywhere else. I think a lot of schools are like that. And those are really interesting developmental years, for kids and what you go through. On some level, I think there's a lot of security being with like the same chunk of people. People came and went there, but there was a good group of people that went there their whole life. But I think it had challenges in terms of always being around the same people. There's a lot of competition there. Even just thinking back to applying for college, since I was chatting about that, like me applying to Michigan was kind of like, oh, Michigan, kind of like third tier. And yet I can't imagine having gone anywhere else. So it was only till I got to Michigan and met all these other people that were like dying to go to Michigan that I was like, oh, because I didn't get into an Ivy League school. So stuff like that. And yet there's awesome people there, and I think, I don't know that I recognized that at that point, So, kind of like the duality of like an amazing experience, but personally, I think a bit challenging, and challenging in the respect of breaking out of kind of the mold that you are, like I ran into people from high school, even now, but in college and when I went abroad, and they were like, wow, you are nothing like what we thought you were. Because you kind of got pinned as a certain person. You did certain things, like you hung with certain people, and that you didn't break out of that, which I think in some senses at any school. But in this one, when you're kind of with the same group of people for that long, I don't know. So it was an interesting experience.
All right, so this is Becca of today.
Yeah.
Sharing this now.
Yes.
What was 15-year-old Becca saying about high school?
Hated it. If I were to look back on high school, I would say in 9th grade, it's 15. Well, I don't know that I would hated it. That's kind of strong.
It just came out.
Yeah. I think in 9th grade, I was already to move on. Like I was starting to kind of, if I were to look back now, recognize it was time to see different things. Bored with some of the people around me, bored with some of the experiences. Bored's kind of lame, but like, it was like, okay, same people, same parties, same, and already looking to do something else. I wouldn't say it wasn't like stimulating because my classes were hard, the subject matter. But yeah, I was feeling itchy to move forward.
All right, so here's another question.
Okay.
It's going to lead to school again.
Okay.
Did you have any favorite teachers?
Yes, favorite teachers. Starting with 1st grade.
Okay.
Her name was Mrs. Mears. And I don't know that my dad's run into her recently, but he did occasionally, like in the last few years. And she greeted everybody on the first day at the door. So we all had to line up. And she wanted to like introduce herself and greet every single kid individually. And I remember standing at the door, I think with my mom, and she gave me 2 choices. She said, do you want to be called Becky or Rebecca? Now, at that point, I was kind of shy, and in my mind, I'm thinking, she didn't say Becca. And so I chose Becky. And so for 3 years, I was Becky until I changed schools and then voiced an opinion. But she just had this way, especially going from a small kindergarten to a new school. She was very welcoming. She got you excited about school. She was so warm, So I loved going to school. And then in 3rd grade, this woman greeted us. I don't remember her name, but she wore polyester pants with bell bottoms and a polyester shirt with this collar, and like slicked her hair over every day. I mean, it was a different outfit, but pretty much the same. I don't remember her shoes. She was the beginning of me understanding how much I liked organization. She gave everybody a student number, and so everything was kind of with a student number. My number was 16. I still use that to this day. Like when I mark my books, you know, like that I want to keep, I put my name on it and I circle page 16, so that if anyone were to tear out the first page, I could look at page 16. But she, I don't know, everything she did was fun, and she made learning really fun. And then there's kind of like a low. There were some really amazing teachers at Pinecrest. I mean, they definitely were there because they cared. I mean, chemistry, I think I took that in 10th grade. I had no interest in it, but she made it fun. I don't remember her name either. And then I had some teachers that didn't like me, that made my senior year, I had a teacher for AP English, and she would ask me the most random questions that, you know, didn't have anything to do with the book, just because she was trying to check to see if I read the book. And then I would come back with an answer, you know, and she'd be like, all right, moving on. So there were people like her. I don't know, I'm blanking. You know, I think my first grade teacher is the most memorable. And then there's kind of a lull. Maybe we'll come back to that one.
Yeah, and you answered the next question, which is teachers that you did not like.
Yeah.
So was that one?
Yep, she's pretty memorable. I mean, it was a joint class, and so there were two AP English. There was literature and language. I was in language, but we would read some of these books together. So it was like all the class together. So like, I don't know, 50 people, and then both teachers. And, you know, I mean, although I know some of these people, you know, like you don't want to be called on and not know the answer, especially when she does it to me all the time. And that was a joint class. And like, it was one of those questions, you know, like you knew half the people hadn't read this book. And I happen to love this book and do today. It was Pride and Prejudice. And, you know, she asked me this question, which was, she's like, so Becca, tell the class about the people to animal and animal to people metaphors in Pride and Prejudice. And I was like, what? There aren't any. And that was my first thought, like, what? There aren't any. And I remember looking at my best friend who was across the room, like, because she was in the other class, but I would always tell her how this woman picked on me, and she was looking at me like, oh my God, she really does pick on you. And so she's, you know, circling me in the class, and I just remember, like, she was here, and I looked back and I said, you know, I don't think there are any. She was like, all right, you're right, moving on. And to this day, I mean, like, that is one of my favorite stories, but I will never forget that people to animal, animal to people references.
Are there any?
No, I mean, nothing memorable. Nothing memorable. It's not like, you know, there are other books like Animal Farm. That question would have been a lot more relevant. But yeah, she was definitely one of them. And then I did dance. That was something at Pinecrest that when I was a little girl, I did ballet, but that was like, you know, all of us just sitting there, like moving your feet back and forth. And I was chosen to be in the dance program, and, you know, and then as you got to high school, it kind of weeded out between like the people who were not really dancers and the people who were like amazing at it. And she pushed me really hard to the point that I had got an injury and I had to sit out my senior year. And that was a challenging relationship with her because I didn't always understand her, and she was very tough. In hindsight, you know, seeing her and going back to visit the school and like bringing my stepdaughters there, you know, she's lovely, and she just really was pushing people, and that's the dancer mentality. But that was a really strange relationship for me. So.
Okay. Thank you. Describe the games you played at school. Or sports. You mentioned dance already.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I didn't really play sports in high school. I mean, up until a few years ago, when my language was corrected by coaching, I would always say that I didn't really have the hand-eye coordination to play sports. So like in the summer, I would play tennis, things like that. I played soccer when I was younger, but I became the tallest girl on the team, and that freaked me out. I mean, I was little. I did dance pretty much from 4th grade until my senior year when I had an injury. So that was pretty rigorous. I mean, we were there 5 days a week and sometimes on the weekends. I never really felt like an athlete as a younger person, which would explain, you know, as an adult, you know, me wanting to do things like marathons or triathlons, because I never felt athletic. So I didn't really play any team sports.
Yeah. Are you athletic now?
Am I athletic now? I think so. I mean, I try, I play at it.
Okay.
I don't take it as seriously. I mean, you know, when I ran a marathon, there was no interest in me placing or winning. It was just to finish. I'm definitely a lot more athletic, I think, on the health side at this point. And having, you know, watched people in my family who became very unhealthy and had unhealthy habits, that's really, I think, pushed me to feel better. And then my own some of my own health challenges. You know, I never wanted a doctor to tell me no. So, you know, I think I've kept up with that. I also recognize the benefits for myself. And now being a student again, like, I need to sleep and I need energy. So I think I would tend to say I'm more athletic now. Right. By choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was your first paying job?
My first paying job, like under the table.
I've had 2 people ask me the same thing, like, however you want to call it.
I mean, the first thing I can remember would be my grandfather. I mean, I was young. I would come over and help them, like, organize things. I don't even know what that really meant. Mostly was like change the timer on the VCR, you know, take the garbage out. That was under the table.
Can you explain what a VCR is?
Can I explain what a VCR? Yes. It's a video cassette recorder that you used to put a tape in, you know, like this size, and you would record television. Or you could record on a camera with a VCR tape, I think, the really old ones, which were huge.
Good.
Yeah.
Just for the folks that are not aware of what a VCR is.
True, correct. So, I mean, I guess there was babysitting jobs occasionally. I wasn't a huge babysitter, which also led to a story that I, you know, wasn't very maternal for a while and didn't think I was very good with kids. Also been corrected. And also through life experience, know that that's absolutely not true. But I think my first real job, I forgot about this. I worked in high school at the school store, and I loved that job. I don't even know how the opportunity presented itself, but I loved doing that, you know, just being able to, there's something about it that felt very high school to me. And I think I only did it for a year. But that was something that I loved. And then in college, I worked at a coffee house. I got a job as a freshman, and I loved that because it was kind of outside of the rest of my personal world, and that was like, you know, a place I could go and connect with other kind of people, and I learned a lot. So
yeah. What was your favorite job?
My favorite job.
And why?
Of all time.
Of all time.
Now? I mean, I definitely love what I do now. And I do. I mean, I think to get to this point in 13 years in the making, like, to me, it's kind of like a job, and I would be remiss not to say that. I mean, I love what I do. But I think the coffee house was totally my favorite job. It really was. Like, I mean, it was like a place where, like, all these different walks of life came and worked, as well as, like, you know, we had regulars. It was the first time, like, I mean, I was promoted to a shift manager. I didn't even want to do that. I just loved it. You know, it was like we had like a little family. Yeah. So I think that was definitely, and I mean, I learned how to make drinks that I wasn't in like a bar, which I thought I would do in college, like work in a bar. I didn't do that. I just kind of specialized in coffee, and I loved it. Like, you know, to be able to see some of those talents and work with people that, again, at a huge school, I probably wouldn't interact with on a day-to-day basis. So I love that job.
Yeah, awesome. Now, which one is or was your least favorite job?
Least favorite job? It's going back a ways.
All the way up to the present.
Yeah. I think it would have to be, without naming names, one of the more recent jobs I had as a social worker. It was very administrative, and so not clinical in any way. And I was brought onto this agency to, kind of support them through an audit and get them up and running because the director had left and I had a license. So I did that and was there for, I would say, 6 or 7 months maybe. And then they promoted me to this administrative position because my supervisor left. And it was all like making phone calls, writing grants, dealing with housing issues. And I honestly, to this day, do not know how that person did the job for 4 years, because it was running 5 programs that were, your phone never stopped ringing. You literally, you were there 10 hours. The staff did everything and anything they wanted to, and really nothing that was their job. I heard things like, I can't do my work at work. You would look at you would look at some of the budgets and everything was like over budget, but we had no money for this. And I had a boss who, basically would say, I'll show you how to do it. And then she would sit down and type out the grant at my desk, and I would have no idea how to do it. And it was the one time I learned, I can't do this. I learned within 3 months. I was like, this job is not for me. And I tried to resign, and they asked me to stay until they hired someone else, which then went about 3.5 more months. And at that point, I was in another developmental coaching program that basically, everyone around me was like, when are you going to leave? And when are you going to say you're going to leave? I think some of the people at that agency had just misguided perceptions of what that position could be. But it was probably one of the worst choices I could have chosen for myself. I had no idea what I was doing, and I was so out of my element. There are a few things that came out of that. One was I met somebody who was my boss's secretary, who I'm very good friends with to this day. But other than that, it was a horrible job. Horrible job. It was one of the days I took my stepdaughter to work with me, and she literally said after 3 hours, she goes, Becca, your phone does not stop ringing. There's no way to keep up with the amount of calls. And I was like, yeah, I wasn't kidding. So that probably would be one of the worst choices I made for employment. It just was so not me. And I learned, right? Never do that again. Yeah. That's the first one that comes to mind, and kind of recent. So.
All right. So since it was recent, I'll ask.
Right.
How was the relationship with coworkers and your boss?
At that job? Mm-hmm. Coworkers, well, people I supervised, that goes into the relationships where I think after taking over for someone who had been in that position for 4 years, and in my experience and opinion, didn't probably do everything she was supposed to do to keep the programs running, kind of let the people that worked in those programs kind of run free. And so then me taking over, who's very much a rule follower, and we get to do things the way it says, coming in, they kind of looked at me, and it was kind of like a childhood experience of like, who the heck are you? Like some chick who looks younger than she really is, telling me what to do. So that's when I got things like, I can't do my work at work, and I love that one. It was like one of the first positions I ever got to where I couldn't engage people in relationship. They definitely didn't like me. It didn't really matter who I was or how I presented myself. They wouldn't like me because I was trying to get the program back on track. So some of the relationships were horrible and really challenged. And walking into that kind of environment where, you see the rest of the agency and some of those people who are really friendly, but then the people you work with directly were, not so wonderful. And then kind of sitting in your office. I even had an intern for a while who, bless her heart, did half the things that I couldn't do, like go to outside meetings, answer my phone, even just take the messages. And she had said to me, she came with me from the clinical side because she said she wasn't sure she wanted to be a therapist. So she wanted to try out kind of the administrative side. And within a month of working with me as my intern, basically said, I want to go back to being a therapist. Mm-hmm. I was like, I get it. So I mean, I had support, you know, but some of the co-working relationships, people I supervised, not so much, with the exception of one, who as I was promoted from the other program, I was still over that program, which was somewhat clinical. And, you know, that person was my best friend, is my best friend. So, you know, that one was like my savior. I'd be like, come over here, I need to talk to you. Let's have a meeting. But yeah, I mean, that was a strange environment. And it's a larger agency with tons of programs. Yeah. So I would sit in these meetings with other directors and I'd be like, why can't I be the director of that program? That sounds awesome. Yeah. My final straw really was sitting in the annual budget meeting when they handed out the 2-page, you know, how the budgets were going to work. And my name was on 5 of the different programs. And I don't know how to do a budget. I still don't to this day. Mm-hmm. I kind of raised my hand like, how do you expect me to do all this? And no worries, you know, we'll teach you. And the next day I came in, I said, I'm quitting. Like, I know I quit a few months ago, but I'm not, after 2 weeks, I will not be here. Mm-hmm. And I never did the budgets. So yeah, okay. That was a notorious job.
Yeah. Okay. Did you or do you stick with groups of friends or just individual friends?
Do I stick with groups of friends or like
what's
an
your
individual?
preferred? Yeah, do you like groups of friends or do you just one or more?
Huh. I don't know that I can answer that one directly. I think that I know that I've had friends, like my best girlfriend, I met her when I visited Pinecrest in the 3rd grade. And in the 4th grade, when I showed up there, she was in my class and I walked right up to her, you know, like somebody said to me, like, make a friend immediately. And so I'm still friends with her. You know, she lives across the country, but I still consider her my best friend. I guess I'm kind of talking through it. I guess individuals. Some of them become a group. Like I'm still friends with people I worked at the coffee house with, and that was a group. But now they're all kind of in their own individual place, as people tend to do. But then, you know, I think I'm part of groups, like I'm part of a community, and you know, I don't know all those people, and yet I really like belonging to that and knowing that there's a group of people who have a like-minded, you know, vision that I could probably have a conversation with, even if I didn't know them. Yeah. So I don't know, I think a little bit of both. Yeah. And I think for me, that's where things like social media become so important. You know, mm-hmm. On some level, I keep my life private, mm-hmm. but being able, like I have a friend who lives in New Zealand, and she basically got out of Dodge, you know, after college and moved there and never came back. Mm-hmm. And now my stepdaughter's going there for a year. And, you know, like how awesome is that? I don't talk to her all the time, mostly because of the time zone and everything mm-hmm. like that. But being able to Facebook her and message her and say my stepdaughter's coming there, you know, and know that she will make every effort to go see her and take care of her, things like that. Mm-hmm. So I guess a little bit of both, groups and individuals. Yeah.
Okay. What do you like to do in your spare time?
What do I like to do in my spare time? Well, I guess that's where I would come back to, you know, I'm somewhat of an athlete, but I don't know, I have a dog. My dog is kind of I've had a dog and have decided I never want to not have a dog. So, you know, I wouldn't say I walk her entirely a lot, but definitely spending time with her, spending time with family. To me, downtime, like just being able to watch, like binge watch a series or, you know, a movie. I kind of like yoga. I'm a little bit addicted to that, I would say, recently. My newest challenge is I just signed up for an open water swim, so I'm going to train for that. I do like to have some kind of goal, you know, to do as a balance. But spare time, like one thing I really wish I could do more is travel. I mean, I kind of daydream travel, but I would like to do that a bit more. I would say in the last few years, it's been working on my education. Yeah. That's my spare time.
Are you married?
I am married, yes.
Okay. How did you meet him?
I met on eHarmony.
Okay.
It was, 10 years at this point. I had just moved back to Florida, and I was studying for my license and living with my parents at the time. And my mom sort of subtly suggested that I do something else other than studying for my exam. And I said, well, like what? And she's like, well, maybe it's time for you to get back out there. I had tried online dating in New York with, some interesting experiences, to say that. And so I went on eHarmony, and I did it for 3 months at a time. It was right at the tail end of 3 months. And, this person wrote to me who had 3 little kids, seemed nice enough. He looked vaguely familiar, but I didn't really put anything past it. And I just, there's like, I don't know, 5 steps. I don't even remember, 4 steps that you have to go through. I basically just sent him the first one with my email, which like they might have edited it out, but I didn't know. And I just said like, my account closes in 2 days. If you want to email me, just email me. And he did. So that's how we met. And we started emailing back and forth, talking via instant messenger, because that was really before texting was a huge thing. I'm sure they had it. And so he helped to balance out my sitting in the library and studying all the time. So that's how we met. And then we actually met was he showed up surprisingly while I was studying to surprise me. That's kind of his big thing, is being a surprise. And it was a really awkward, interesting, weird experience. I don't know if you want me to go into that one, but okay.
Before that,
yeah.
Right, if you can put a pause
yes.
on that. We know that online dating is a world of its own.
Yes.
Filled with interesting experiences. I've had my share. I met my wife online. So you said that in New York you tried the online dating with some interesting experience.
Yeah.
Do you mind sharing interesting experiences before you met your current partner?
So when I first moved back to New York, I thought I was in a relationship. I had, it goes a little further back.
Okay.
I was living in New York, and when I decided to go back to graduate school, I started in New York in psychology. And then I soon found that program wasn't for me, and had been the previous year waitlisted at Michigan. And I will jump at any chance to go back to Michigan. So when I actually got in, I was living with someone at the time, and he knew that I wasn't going to say no. And so we kind of put our relationship on pause, so I thought, and I went to school, right? Fast forward, he came to visit me, we had a huge argument, whatever. We, again, put our relationship on pause to the idea that my plan was to finish this program in 18 months and return to New York, which is what I did. But little did I know that when I got back to come and get some of my stuff, we talked about living in separate places just to try, start out, which is like no small task in New York. But, so, and I did not meet him online, but I came back to the apartment, and it was very clear when I walked in. First of all, the doorman walked me upstairs when I had keys. And the first thing he said as he opened the door was, "I'm so sorry." I was like, what? And I was there with my brother Anthony and my dad to help me carry the stuff. And as I opened the door, it was very clear that a woman lived there. Like girl stuff versus just like a bachelor pad. And some of my stuff, like stuff shoved off to the side, but and I just had this like, what? And so then we went into like, clearing it out mode, and me starting to understand it. My dad saying, "Can you call some people to come over here?" Because I was in like catatonic shock. It was the day of the soccer finals too. So all my brother wanted to do, was go and watch the finals. But anyway, so after that experience, soon found out he was in a relationship, obviously living with someone. Within 3 months of being back in New York and working, everybody was saying to me, "It's time for you to get back out there," right? Which is like the famous line. And I was like, no. And so that's when someone said, "Why don't you try online dating? You could take it at your own pace and see what you find." And that's what most people are doing. Because the thing about that was our friends somewhat overlapped. So although we split okay in terms of our friendships, there was some overlap. So like sometimes going out with them, you'd run into not necessarily him, but like other people that knew him. So that's why people were like, do the online dating. Nobody, you won't know anybody. So my first experience with online dating was the guy totally didn't look like his picture. You know, like, could you have asked for, I mean, I guess everybody has their first iconic experience, but I literally walked to this restaurant. I was on time, like, was right in my neighborhood. I never will do that again. Always go outside your neighborhood. And I literally walked right by him. And he, as I'm walking by him, he, calls me back from like, I'm 4 steps away from me. He's like, hey, I'm whatever his name was. And, bless his heart, like he looked nothing like his picture.
Not even a little bit?
No.
A little bit?
No. The picture was, and you'll appreciate this as having taken photographs. I mean, the picture was like this part of his face. And I could see his eyes and like his mouth. So I thought, just like that's the only picture he has of himself. I'm fine with that, But he was probably 400 pounds. And that's probably why he didn't put that picture on. So, bless his heart, whatever. But be truthful about what you look like. And he also was so arrogant. I mean, so I was there, I sat down with it. I'm already feeling awkward because I didn't recognize him. Like it's my fault. And we sit down to dinner and pretty much the next 25 minutes were, he was just so rude to the waitress, rude to me, rude to people who walked by. And at that point I was like, I need to go. That was my first experience. And it was really hard to get out of it. He wouldn't let me leave, not like in an upsetting kind of way, but like, no, let's just stay. And I was like, no, I'm good. And so then, the woman I worked with, we came up with a plan because she was also online dating and she knows that I can listen to anybody. And she said, we set up a plan. She's like 20 to 30 minutes, you make a decision, you leave, right? You always tell someone where you are. You always kind of like let them know when you're going. She's like, don't listen to people's sob stories, Becca. You're not therapizing them. Like you're there to meet somebody. And so it got a little easier and kind of had some structure to it, which made it a little bit better. And from there, the next 2 experiences, both of the men were separated and not completely honest about that part of their life, to which I, obviously found out some things and kind of showed up in the relationship. I'm not going to say more about that one. Okay. But I guess that was... And I'm also kind of selective. I'm selective. I think most people are about who you share things with in your life. I think I was also ready to, be around someone, spend some time, like enjoy the city. And I was very clear the other relationship was over, settle into being back there in a different career because I had returned to New York now in a totally different career. So I was really kind of open to that. And a lot of the people I met up there really wanted to live in New York City, and I wasn't so sure I wanted to stay there forever. And then when I came back to Florida, when my mom kind of gently encouraged me to get back out there, I had said when I moved to Florida, I wanted to plant some roots. Like I wanted to not rent anymore. I wanted to buy a house. Like I wanted to have an investment, which I wasn't just, because in New York, I was spending ridiculous amounts of money on rent. And so that's when I met Chris. I think I was a little bit more fine-tuned and experienced in online dating, and I was sticking to my 20 minutes. And so the first few guys that I went out with down here, they're people who just don't show up, and just leave you sitting there like, okay. It's a really humbling experience. But then when I met Chris, and he, it was so easy to talk to him. He was actually polite. We actually had things to talk about. We had things in common. It was it was a breath of fresh air. Yeah.
So you mentioned that the meeting was kind of awkward. Well, how's the story of the first meeting?
With Chris? So I was studying. Usually I had taken camp at the library. And then a lot of people studied the local library, and I don't remember our library being like that. But I made myself a little too anxious one day, and this lovely stranger next to me kind of said, you need to get out of here. Maybe pick a different study place. And so I picked Barnes & Noble. And so I was studying in Barnes & Noble at that time. There was like a study room on the 2nd floor. And, Chris and I had been communicating via email and via instant message. And the last instant message we had, I had said like, I'm sitting here studying, eating an apple or something. And I didn't hear back from him, which I didn't really think much of. And I thought, whatever, I'll just go back to studying. So all of a sudden, I see this person to my left, like, and I've never actually seen him, only the pictures of him. But I mean, pretty good with visuals and, have some training in art history. So this guy walks in and I'm like, wow, that really looks like this guy. And he kind of walks over to the side. There's probably like 6 tables there. He walks over to the side to look at these bookcases over here. And, he's like perusing. And then all of a sudden he does kind of one of these and bolts and leaves. And I thought, of course I made up this whole story in my mind, like, oh my God, he took one look at me, thinks I'm hideous. And I don't even know if it was him, but like, I'm pretty sure it was him. And why was he here? And how did he know where I was? I mean, I had told him. And then I'm sitting there like having this whole story with a group of strangers who I'm not talking to. Everyone's plugged in on their headphones and their computers. And I thought, well, I just get to keep studying, like if it was him, like whatever, I can't really worry about it and just write that one off. And then, I don't know, 5-10 minutes later, my friend calls and she's having a crisis. So I get up from the table and I walk to kind of where the aisles are. And in Barnes & Noble and Boca, it's 2 stories. And so there's like a story around the outside and then kind of the middle where you can look down, from the second story into like the main part of the bookstore. So I'm standing there at the like fence, looking down, talking to her, listening to her. And he's sitting there. The guy that bolted is sitting there on one of the tables, just like, crossing his arms and like making this face, looking at his phone. So I'm like, okay, I know that's the same guy. And then he looks up and our eyes meet. And, I did one of these like, should I duck? Even though I was fully visible. And we kind of looked at each other. And then he starts coming up the escalator. And she's going on. And I'm like, I gotta go, like not listening to her. And, our eyes just kind of stayed intact. And then he walked over to me. And my first thought was, what are you doing here? As she's still talking. And I just said, like, give me 1 minute. And so I hung up with her. And then I walked around the corner and he's standing there with this bag. And I said, Chris? And he's like, Becca? And I'm like, what? Again, I probably said something like, what are you doing here? And he's like, well, I came to bring you these air fresheners. They were like car air fresheners that you can hang in your car because he said, you said the study room smelled like feet. And I thought, what? So then he kind of took the initiative and said, well, do you want to take a study break? And I said, sure. And still in my mind, I'm thinking, this is the guy that came, saw me, and bolted. I don't really know what's going on right now. And then we went over to Whole Foods and sat there and just like, the conversation was so natural and it kind of flowed. And then, of course, he asked me where I went to school, and he also went to Pinecrest, although he's 6 years older, so we had different experiences entirely. And that was kind of the way it went. Afterwards, I went home and I had texted my parents or something and said, like, I would be late. And when I walked in, my mom was like, what happened? Yeah. So I said, this guy showed up, this guy that I've been talking to, that you've encouraged me to go back online dating. And she's like, he's not just any guy. And I'm like, well, I don't know, I just met him. So that was the first meeting. And the story of it is that, and I didn't know this, but he had walked up to come and find me. And I had said on the messenger that I was eating an apple. He thought I had said I had an Apple computer. So he looked and scanned the room and saw that I didn't have an Apple computer, didn't see anybody. And then as he was trying to be subtle and like check out everybody, he realized he was in the gay erotica section. And so that freaked him out. Yeah. And so he bolted. So that's how we met. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. In addition to it, one of the things he asked me other than the school, he said, my last name. And I looked at him and I said, after we figured out we'd both gone to the same school, and he said, do you know my family? And I said, yeah, I used to ride the bus with your brother. So I used to ride the bus with his brother.
Wow.
So that was it.
It's a small world.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Now, how do you feel about your partner, your husband?
How do I feel about my partner?
Yeah.
How does one answer that question? In an hour?
Yeah. You got time.
I think he's an incredibly compassionate, giving, soulful person. I think he's had a lot of experiences that have shaped his life, like most of us, that he's still very much challenged by, which create roadblocks for him. Mm-hmm. And, given the subject matter of this, whole series, I mean, he's very resilient. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the first things I noticed about him. He was a single dad with 3 kids, which for someone who, as I told you earlier, had this story about not being maternal, was like, oh great, this guy knows how to do it. And, he can teach me, which was great for me. And also someone who seemed to have, their life together, and one that I could kind of join that team. I also really didn't see, as much as I got encouraged to online date, I wanted someone to hang out with and do things. I don't know that I ever saw myself getting married. Mm-hmm. And so when I met Chris, he exuded safety and comfort, and being able to talk about anything, including politics, which I don't really talk about that much. Mm-hmm. But it was around the time of the election. And I was so pleasantly surprised. I had never really been in that kind of relationship, even friendship, that kind of took off that fast. And I think the other thing was, who shows up to a bookstore with car smellies? He's a giver. But in a creative, silly way. And I don't think everyone gets that. So I think that's kind of his foundation. And I think, we'll think about him on a day-to-day basis. I think some of the challenges get the best of him, just like they do for me. Mm-hmm. And I would like to think that as a team, we complement each other, although sometimes we are both so strong and so stubborn that they are not complementary in any way.
Okay. Next question is, where did you get married?
Where did I get married? I got married in the Keys, in Isla Morada, at a place called the Chica Lodge. Okay. I had wanted to, it was kind of between, we kind of both thought about it as a destination. Both of our families are down here. And then his grandparents are the ones surviving next generation up. Mm-hmm. So we wanted to make it easy for them. My sort of backup plan, as it always is in life, was to have it in Italy. Yeah. That was a bit far. And he really has no connection to Italy. So we started to pick places you could at least drive to. Yeah. And it's funny to me because I don't think I really appreciated the beach and the ocean until I was an adult. Growing up here as a child, people said to me all the time, God, you probably go to the beach all the time. I was like, no, never. Never. Only when my family's in town, from up north. But coming back here as an adult, really learning to appreciate living so close to the ocean and having it, and being able to just go there and sit there. So when we started to think about places, I wanted to be outside. I didn't want to be in a room. I wanted to have our ceremony somewhere somewhat natural. And if it wasn't going to be Italy and it wasn't going to be the mountains, it was going to be the ocean. Yeah. So we looked around at several places, and that it's a resort. It's by no means natural, but it was the most natural-like place. And it was definitely a roller coaster in planning, but it was an absolutely beautiful wedding.
Yeah. When was it?
It was in January of 2012.
Okay, awesome. Who pays the bills?
Who pays the bills? Well, both of us. Okay. I think it's an awesome question. Mm-hmm. I think I don't know, but I wonder about this all the time, and I ask for support. I feel like this is a conversation that I would have liked some training on. How to have a financial conversation with your partner. Because we really fumble at it. And I still to this day do not know how to do that. I think when we first met, I was so used to paying all the bills on my own and being very independent, that I kind of said, when I moved in with Chris, what do I pay? Should I take over a bill? Do you want to sit down every month and do it? And, I kind of got the, I'll handle it. And I probably should have seen that as a red flag, because still to this day, we both pay them. We finally have a checking account together that we put money in every month, but we still don't necessarily I don't know, that's a really good question, I think. And I really would I would like someone, and put this out there, someone to create a workshop for teaching couples how to have a financial conversation and how to create a budget. I'm sure it's already out there, but I would really like that. I would sign up in a heartbeat, because I think it's a challenging standpoint,
That's why I asked the question.
Yeah, I'm sure. It came up this morning. I think that's an awesome question.
Yeah. And kind of along the same lines.
Yes.
Yeah. Who decides how the money is spent?
Who decides how the money's spent? I don't know. I think the first thing that comes up for me there is it takes communication, and I don't know that always happens, and sometimes things get paid for or spent, right? That's not something I would choose, or vice versa. I would really like to have better, more healthy, more of a format to have those kinds of questions. There are certain things that we just have to pay for, right? Like FP&L, But I guess certain things, we share car insurance. And that has been one bill I would say we've actually communicated about in terms of what wasn't working, when they would continue to raise it, finding something better. I don't know. I kind of don't want to say we have we decide together, because we don't well. But on some level, thinking about moving or having a different house, we have to make that decision together. We don't always agree, and sometimes the conversation kind of dies there. But I think for bigger things, we're pretty good about at least having an explosive conversation about it. Other things, I guess the other thing to say is that we somewhat function financially independent, so I pay for my business, he pays for his. We don't, and this is where I'm not sure it's good or bad, or whether we could do better, in terms of sharing some of that information, because we don't.
Yeah. Okay. So how would you describe your relationship?
How would I describe my relationship? In one word? No.
No. You got, this one, You get your choice of words.
Challenging. We have such great capacity, and we're both so strong-willed. And I don't know that I say challenging in a bad way. I think we work to meet each other at challenges. I think we also both get really frustrated at times. I would also say intense, also not in the negative kind of spin. Yeah. In the spin of, I don't think our connection is just simple. It's a very strong and powerful connection. Yeah. We also have time, in terms of 10 years, sometimes that's easy to kind of say you've been doing this for 10 years. Mm-hmm. But then when you think about the fact that you've been in space with somebody for 10 years, I think the only other long relationship I had was my dog and Verizon. I was with Verizon for 11 years. And that wasn't really a great relationship either. So I think it's intense. And I think sometimes that really gets in our way. There's definitely a strong foundation. I think the way that we connected in the beginning, regardless of the car smellies in Barnes & Noble, was, I think I said this, Chris was the first person I felt like I could have those kinds of conversations and be as vulnerable and open up where, I'm really trained to be the listener. I'm trained to, keep things about me, especially in a session with a client, it's not about me. So then when you try and do that on a personal basis, it's not always so easy. So he was the first person I felt like I could do that. I think there's a lot of caring, there's a lot of compassion, and I think we're still trying to find our way with a lot of explosions.
Yeah. Okay.
Sometimes good, sometimes not so pleasant.
Yeah. Those are relationships.
Yes, yes. I sometimes really think, and I say this with clients all the time, sometimes I'm amazed that human beings are in relationship, given how different we think. It's like you and I are sitting across from each other, and I really have no idea what you're thinking because I'm doing all the talking for the most part, other than the questions. And although you're listening and hearing me, you're also interpreting. So it's like we never know what the other person's really understanding unless we ask. And still then, do we know? I think it's amazing sometimes we're in relationship given how different two people can be.
Did you both have the same thoughts about children?
Did Chris and I have the same thoughts about children? Okay. So I recognize that so when I started dating Chris, he was, I think I said this earlier, I've met people who are not so honest about where they were at the end of their relationship. So when I told people that I was dating a single father of 3, first question was, is he actually divorced? And, you said you might want to have children, so what are you going to do about that? And of course, the first month or two, I was like, can't really ask that, it's too soon. I'm not ready to. So I had a long talk with a friend of mine who I've known since I was 17, the whole way to his house, 40-minute drive. And she basically coached me into initiating that conversation because, things were starting to get serious and I had met the kids at this point, and if I wanted to have children, I needed to find out if he wanted to have more children. So that was kind of my agenda for this date, although he had no idea. And we had it was around that time when you start having those deal breaker conversations, have you ever done this? Would you ever do this? So that was one of them. So it kind of felt, in my mind, somewhat natural to bring that up. And he handled it like a champ when he looked right at me and said, yeah, I want to have a tribe because I'm Jewish. And so he made a pun and I was like, okay, that's hilarious. And it was, for some people, a really challenging conversation, and all the coaching I got the whole way there, he just said yes. So, and at that point, I didn't know if I wanted to have kids. I just wanted the option. And we were done with that conversation. So I was kind of like, all right, moving on. What do you want to talk about? So we did. I mean, we seemed to be on the same page. We have not had children together. So, and all the kids are soon to be 20, 18, and 17. And that's kind of the way life has gone. But I think we were on the same page. We've had some minor slips in the way that has shown up in the last few years. And I think the vision has been the same, is to have a family and to enjoy the family.
Okay. So are you planning on having children?
Not at the moment, not planning on having children.
Okay. All right.
It's also something I think, in terms of the science and being 43, I'm not sure how I feel about that at this point again, so.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Now, have you ever told yourself there is something wrong here? And the first time you ever said that?
Have I ever told myself
there's something wrong here?
There's something wrong here. Like in my life?
Yeah. And the first time you ever said that?
Yes is the answer to the question.
And what happened?
The first time, I guess I'm thinking back to childhood and, my brother not always getting along with my dad because my dad is his adoptive dad. There was a lot of tension, and not tension I necessarily understood and wasn't explained to me because it really, at this point looking back, wasn't really in my business, but But to kind of think about that statement, the way you put it, like, there's something wrong here. Like, why don't these people get along? And, you know, I had some of the information, like, you know, my brother's dad wasn't in the picture, and I don't know that I really took it much further because I was kind of shut down about that. But yeah, that would be the first time I remember noticing, like, something's not right here. All right, and I changed your words, but, and then I think, you know, I think about it more generally as a child, thinking about my grandparents, and, you know, they were not very religious, but very traditional and Jewish, and having come from generations, you know, that have survived wars and been persecuted. And I remember experiencing that for the first time, being in a, you know, I went to the same school for a long time, like always around the same kinds of people. And then I don't even remember what was going on, but I was somewhere with people that I knew, and I wouldn't say we were persecuted against, but we were sort of like, not targeted, but like isolated and identified, you know, as Jewish kids, even though not all of us were, which was really strange. And I think that was another time that I think, like, around, you know, like the first time I really felt like there's something not right, and almost kind of like a safety alarm, like telling me to get out of there. And now, you know, in doing what I do professionally, I talk a lot and I supervise a lot about trusting your gut and working, you know, like to understand kind of like what you're experiencing from the person you're sitting with. And I think about that kind of experience, and it was the first time that my safety alarm was like, we just need to get out of here and like not be in this situation. And I think that it makes me think about other experiences I've had where I just didn't even question it. I just got out of a situation, like avoiding some kind of argument, or, you know, with another group of people, or I don't know if that's really what you're asking, but, and that happened actually in Israel too. When I was younger, we were in a place, they were walking us through a part of Jerusalem, and we got rocks thrown at us. And I mean, we weren't doing anything but walking. So that was definitely like, something is wrong. I mean, that was very evident that something was wrong. But I think more currently, I would say kind of what I was starting to say, like I use that more professionally, you know, as being able to understand, like if someone's not telling me something and they want to share more and I need to ask another question, you know, like something's not right here. And I think also just safety wise, you know, I have 2 stepdaughters who are wonderfully carefree, and, you know, talking to them about safety and like using that alarm to recognize, like when you're out and about doing whatever you want to do, like recognize your surroundings. Because I think sometimes, and this sounds really dark, but we have a false sense of security, you know, and I think I got that from learning, like living in a city and knowing I felt safer in New York City sometimes than I feel around here, because everybody gets in their car and doesn't necessarily talk, whereas in the city everybody's walking around. So I guess talking that through, I learned a lot of that in the city, like something's not right here, I'm not in a good place, I'm alone, and that makes me think of being in New York for September 11th. I definitely said that statement the day after, when, you know, we got up and we went to walk the dog, and I thought something told me like, you know, maybe it's not okay to breathe the air outside. And they hadn't, you know, publicized any serious warning at that point, although now we all know in hindsight it was pretty serious, about the air. And we walked outside, and my dog immediately ran back to the door. She was just a puppy. And I thought, okay, if the dog knows, right, people to animal, animal to people, when the animal knows that something smells bad and wants to go back inside, then something's not right here. And so, you know, starting to really pay attention to that cue when it comes, however it comes, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Next question. Have you ever told yourself, I do not belong, and the first time it happened?
Have I ever told myself that I don't belong? Hell yeah. When
was the first time you remember?
I It's so hard to remember my childhood when you ask me these questions. Nothing comes to mind when I was younger, but actually, I mean, I kind of alluded to this earlier. When I was in high school in dance, I think that might have been one of the first times where she was really clear about the distinction between people who are going to excel at dance and people who are just going to, do it in high school. And that might have been a life lesson for me. Like, I think I might have taken it more personally and harsh as like, you really don't belong. But I think it was one of those kind of like rule outs, like her gently, not so gently at times, kind of saying that's not really for you unless you want to make a career of it. And I guess as I say that, as you get older, I think you learn to accept that message, or maybe not at first, maybe there's resistance, but maybe to take that message on as if to say, okay, like something's telling me I don't belong, whether it's safety or whether it's just like, you're not going to have a career of dance for the rest of your life, and use it to your advantage. Like, what's that message telling you? Almost like what's not working kind of thing. I've definitely said that in relationship before, like I don't belong, or being around certain types of people where I don't feel like I have anything in common. I've definitely said that networking before, walking into a networking meeting like, oh my God, I don't belong in here. Even in my career, I changed careers. I was in the art world, for 5 years. And as much as I tried to make it work, and there was parts of my job that I loved, and I probably could have done really well as an individual, there was something about it to me that just said, like, this is not my passion. Like, I don't belong here. Like, there's something more out there. I don't know. Okay. Yeah.
Last one before the last question.
Okay.
Have you ever told yourself, I'm on my own? Not as in, I'm independent on my own, but as in, I'm alone. I'm on my own.
Have I ever told myself that I'm on my own, that I'm alone? Like, I'm more than independent.
Yeah, it's none of that, I got my apartment, I'm on my own.
Right.
Yay.
Not the happy kind.
Correct, I'm on my own.
Yes. Yeah, I'm a powerful doer, and I was brought up to be independent. That was one of the first messages I know my grandmother said to me, like, don't rely on any man, you can do it on your own. And she wasn't really even a feminist, but I think for me in the last few years, one of the more powerful conversations I have gotten to work on is asking for support. Because my default is, I'm alone, I can do it on my own. And almost to the point of, I have to do it on my own. So yeah, I mean, I think I still struggle with that, telling myself all the time, because I will default into that mode. Like, well, okay, if you're not gonna help me, or you don't see it my way, or, I'll just do it on my own. I mean, I do it every day.
So this is a follow-up question. It's always depending on the response. When you say that I'm on my own, what do you truly want?
I think sometimes, I would say sometimes I would answer that question with, yes, I really do want to do it on my own. But I would say 90% of the time, I don't. I really, truly believe at this point, again, the person who didn't want to get married, didn't want to be in a committed relationship. I mean, I really found the power of support and connection. And I think we're wired to connect with people. I really believe that. I mean, I know that I walk down the street and I smile at people I don't know just because I want to connect with them. Mm-hmm. I know I say hi to people. I know I send messages just to see how they're doing. I would say 90% of the time, I don't want to do it alone. I don't want to have to do it alone. And I know I don't. It doesn't mean that it's not challenging to then, teach someone, guide someone, have patience while they catch up to where you are kind of thing, or vice versa. But I would say ultimately, to answer your question, I don't want to do it alone.
So if you can recall the first time those words meant something, do you remember what happened?
That I don't want to do it alone?
I'm on my own.
Oh. The first one that comes to mind was when I moved back to New York. I mean, there were definitely other ones, but when I moved back to New York and I thought I was in a relationship and I really wasn't. I mean, first the, like, how could I have been so deluded question comes to my mind, but that question was so prevalent. Like, I mean, it felt like I had no options. No matter what I said, no matter what I tried, like, I walked into an apartment where people were living together, and that's what I said. And I had support there, and it was just like, no, I get to do this on my own because this is the choice I've made. So, yeah, it was a really powerful day. I mean, lots of roller coasters, and there was a lot of doing this to kind of distract me from it. But I don't think I really got the meaning of that day until perhaps a year later. Kind of slowly trickled in. Like, everything I thought I was coming back to changed in an instant, and then I got to change it, Yeah. But it went from a I have to an I want to, and I think that took a full year.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we're done with these questions.
Okay.
Well done. Now here we go. This is the staple question of this project.
Okay.
Right. We're gonna fast forward 100 years, 200 years, because hopefully this never happened, but it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. That is that we're gonna die. Mm-hmm. Yeah? So you are at your eulogy, right?
Okay.
What's being said about Becca?
Well, I would hope that people are saying that I was kind and compassionate and giving, and that, I don't know, my gosh. I don't know. I think even if less things were said, I would like the people that were there to connect in some way, perhaps to understand like who I was to them, and for them to be able to connect and heal in that way, because I imagine that they would be sad that I'm not there in some way, but almost like to create community from our individual relationships, to understand how, like, let's say, like, someone I worked with to somebody I went to school with, for them to create connection and to move from there, if that makes sense. Like, it's nice when people say things that are nice and things that I've accomplished, or, things that I was to them, but I'd almost want the connection to continue. And so for them to kind of, even if it's only transient and for a short period of time, right, for them to know each other and to move forward and kind of carry on that tradition.
Who's there?
Who's there? Well, whoever survives. Because I'm going to live forever, right? Like, that's what everybody says. I don't want to live forever. I would like to think, like, the next generation, my stepchildren, some of the family that might be younger, my nephews are younger, hopefully their families, that they've moved on and chosen to create families that, they can share certain memories that we've had. I don't know, extended family. One thing I'd really like to do in the future is, find some of the family that's around the world. So perhaps all the next generations of those people that I have connected with, and perhaps some of my generation.
Yeah. Okay. Now, any last words? It's your time. You can look at the camera and say.
Any last words? That's really hard. I don't know. I think it's really an awesome experience to be able to sit here and just recall parts of your life. And I think that your mission for this about ordinary people, just sitting here for however long it's been, being able to think about things I don't think about on a day-to-day basis and connect them to my everyday, it's an experience, and an experience that, will create something. And even from the first time I met you and I shared that with you, I had that experience here. Something happened, something was created for me that, has led to this part of my life. And I hope everybody chooses to do this. Because it's awesome. So thank you.
Thank you.